As a junior officer and instructor, I just took command of one of the top crews in our unit, and shortly thereafter sent off to Desert Storm. It was a surprise to us. Our mission for the aircraft that I fly wasn't a fit for Desert Storm. And yet we got our orders, we packed our bags, we said goodbye to our families, and we were off to the first Gulf War the next morning. In the war environment, there's a lot of adrenaline and stress. Today, I feel the responsibility of the 10 crew members behind me, and most importantly, the 2 pilots in the airplane that are trailing us who asked for emergency refueling. Tension is created by the unknown, and there's lots of unknown in the war environment. And the radio calls from those pilots who were desperately needing that extra fuel made it much more intense for me. And believe it or not, today, we took an airplane that wasn't ready to be refueled in that manner. So I'm hand flying to prevent any drop-offs of those airplanes and to keep that platform steady. After the refueling was complete successfully, we let our chicks go. They call them chicks because we're like the mother hen that gives them their nourishment. And then I looked down at my fuel gauge, right at bingo fuel. Believe it or not, bingo fuel means just that. It's time to head back to base. And when we head back to base, we're going to have just a little bit of fuel reserve in case there's something wrong that happens. The interesting thing is, when I called the flight crew over the interphone and I said, "It's time to go home, guys," I got a message really quickly over the interphone from Frosty. He's my navigator. And he says, "I don't know when it happened, Sheriff, but there's a storm between us and the base." Immediately, I go into my options mode. I've got one flight path that I can take that's got a storm between me and the base, and the only other viable path is over anti-aircraft artillery fire. One thing scarier than getting shot at by really big guns on the ground is a Middle Eastern thunderstorm. They grow big and fast. The only thing scarier that night than a thunderstorm was the fact that I may be flying over Iraq, run out of fuel, and have to land, or worse, crash. Scary times for us. The interesting thing through all of that is that the trust of the flight crew is so important. So when I fired the radio call off that said, "We're going through the storms, guys," they all, when I turned to look at them, locked eyes with me. And when we locked eyes, I immediately got approval, but a search for reassurance. And when I smiled at them one by one, I got thumbs up and I knew they were ready. But most importantly, they trusted me. They trusted me because I trust myself. Because I trust my decision, I trust my inner guidance. And probably just as important, I care about them and I care about their families. My message for you today is, you're the captain of your life. You can live it on purpose or you can live it on autopilot. As the captain of your life, you're going to experience opportunities where you need to rely on people's trust. And that's the first lesson that I want to discuss with you today, the significance of trust. It's extremely important to flight crews to have the trust, but it's no less significant in your life to have trust. With over 20,000 hours in flight in a simulator, as a pilot, instructor, and evaluator, people trust me with their lives every day. They trust me to guide them to their chosen destination. And now as a consultant, my clients also trust me to guide them from actually through life and work to their desired results. Whether those results are getting to know themselves so they can make better decisions, have a more fulfilled life, excel as leaders, or make the difference that they're meant to make in the world. But it doesn't matter. In both cases, just like on the flight deck, those people trusted me and trust me because I trust myself. I trust my inner guidance. I trust my intuition. As a major airline pilot, I experience turbulence every single day in one way or the other. And that's the second lesson that I want to discuss with you, turbulence. Turbulence to a flight crew is an annoyance more than anything else. I did a survey with 300 people, and in that survey I asked them what they thought for them was the thing that bothered them the most or what worried them the most in flying. And 80% of them came back and said, it's turbulence. I understand. Turbulence can be very scary. As a matter of fact, on one flight, we got surprised by severe turbulence. And when I called the air traffic controller to tell him that we were in the turbulence, he thought I was in a helicopter. That's how much we were getting bounced around. But would you be surprised if I told you that statistically there hasn't been one plane crash or accident that's been tied to turbulence? In fact, in the US, the most turbulence-related injuries in 1 year was only 94. To put that in perspective for you, United Airlines flies 4,500 departures per day. For you math whizzes out there calculating it, that's a very, very, very small percentage. And to plug for the airlines one time, it was because they weren't wearing their seatbelts. Turbulence is nothing more than a sudden change in speed or direction of the air around an aircraft. It's a wind shift, an updraft, a downdraft. When in your life, or how often in your life, do you experience a change in your direction or change in the speed from something in your life? You have to trust yourself before other people are going to trust you. And when it comes to flight training, it teaches you how to be a pilot. It doesn't teach you how to be a captain. That comes from the inside. So I'm sure you're very interested in what happened that night over Iraq, so let me tell you the rest of the story. As you know, we had a really long mission. It was actually 8 hours before we had the emergency refueling. And we're picking our way, tired and exhausted, through the thunderstorms. We were getting bounced around by constant turbulence, and the flashes of light that lit up the clouds in the cockpit caused temporary night blindness for us. But if you can imagine, in the front seats, there's two pilots scanning outside and waiting for a lightning flash to hopefully see a hole in the sky. And in the back of the aircraft, there are two people intent to find a path through the storm cells that are out there in front of us. And every once in a while, Frosty firing off a turn to make sure we're going in the right direction. And then there it was. Right out in front of us, the runway, all lit up just for us. We set up for a long approach. We had an uneventful landing, and we put the airplane to bed. And as a good flight crew, we started our debrief, and we realized that as a crew, each one of us sharing our expertise and supporting the others, we developed a level of trust that we never would have had, and most people never will. To get beyond or navigate through the turbulence and storms in your life, it starts on the ground before you even get in the air. And to do that, you really got to look at the fact that there are other things in your life that can affect you all the time. So how do you prepare for them? The flight crew flight plans. In one of the questions in the survey that I put out, I asked people what they thought the most critical phase of flight was. And I got the answers that I expected to get, landing and takeoff. It makes sense. But really, that flight planning is the most critical area of flight, and that's the third lesson that I want to discuss with you today. The flight crew, when they flight plan, they look at their destination, they look at their departure airports, and they become familiar with them. They look at the obstacles that might be in between there, and we call them threats. They look at the terrain and the weather, both at the airports and en route. They look at the quality of the airplane. Is it ready to fly the mission that we're scheduled for today? We look at the flight crew members, and we look at each other's talents and gifts. Where can they support, and where might they need to be supported? And then we develop contingencies. So I said you can flight plan in your life. Well, flight planning in your life should happen before any transition, should happen before any transformations. You should open the door to learn more about yourself, and you can do that by asking 5 pertinent and very essential questions, and then find your answers to those questions. The first one, where am I? That's your departure airport. The second one, who am I? That's the real you. That's the inner guidance that you have, truly the pilot, the captain. And then there's, what do I have to offer? The what I have to offer is your talents and gifts. Where can you support, and where do you need supported? Then why am I here? That's our destination. And then finally, what or how can I live my purpose? And that's your flight plan. We live in a chaotic world right now. It's the energy shifts that are happening. And the U.S. right now is in crisis. 80% of people say that they're disconnected from work. 60% say they're disconnected from their families or their relationships. And many of us, maybe even most, are walking that thin line to burnout. Why is that happening? Well, one of the main reasons is because we haven't taken the time to turn inward. We haven't taken the time to find our true purpose. You are the captain of your life. You can live it on purpose, or you can live it on autopilot. I have a challenge for you today. Kick off the autopilot. Tap into your inner guidance. Surround yourself with people you trust. Navigate around or climb above the turbulence in your life. Weather the storm and fly your flight path. Thank you.